It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Seminole Sidelines Podcast presented by the Osceola. My name is Patrick Burnham. I'm a football writer for the Osceola and host of Seminole Sidelines. Joining me today will be Osceola football recruiting analyst and president of Elite Scouting Services, Charles Fishbein, to talk about next week's early signing period for Florida State head coach Mike Norvell and his football program. Well, Fish, welcome to. For those of you that don't know, we call Charles Fish. So, Fish, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, man?
Well, obviously, this is a big time of year for everybody. We've got a little bit of an extended college football season with Florida State obviously canceling games against Clemson and Virginia, which has now run the season through December 19th. And there's something kind of exciting going on next Wednesday as it pertains to the future. And early National Signing Day will be here. I believe it starts Wednesday the 16th and ends on the 19th, which is a Friday. And Florida State is expected to sign 12 of its 15 high school commitments on Wednesday of next week. And I want to go through each kid with you. But first of all, I want to go with some big picture things. This was supposed to be Mike Norvell and his staff's first full class, and by full class, I mean a class that they have started recruiting while they were at Florida State for the entirety of a calendar year, and basically be able to get out and see those kids and visit with their coaches and families and establish these relationships. But there's been a continuous dead period since about March the 12th for all colleges, but particularly for Mike Norvell and any first-year head coach, really. Tell us a little bit about the impact this extended dead period has had on Florida State and Mike Norvell's recruiting.
I think it's had a tremendous impact, and not only for them, but most coaching staffs, like you said, first-year coaches, because a lot of this is relationships. They've already done the evaluation part, but building those relationships, I've spoken to a couple coaches about this, how important is the evaluation of the individual kid, getting them on campus, seeing how they react around other players, seeing how they react around coaches. The film doesn't lie. We know whether the kid's good or not. They do too. It's that evaluation of that individual and what they're like I just discussed, is very important. And they've lost out on that. And they're basically rolling the dice on these guys and hoping they pan out, and it's going to be interesting to see how it works, not only for Florida State, but across the board. Who does the best jobs of hits and misses when we look back in 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, because Mike Norvell has said it. It's like a mantra. It's when it comes to recruiting, it's about fit. And, I'm of the opinion it's much harder to determine fit from a personality standpoint, a character standpoint, when you don't have those relationships. Talk and listen, at the end of the day, the best players are going to get signed regardless of what coaches say about fit, right? I mean, I think we're both I'm not saying that doesn't have something to do with it, but, ability over trumps fit sometimes. So, tell us a little bit about trying to, establish the right fit virtually.
Yeah, it's difficult because, look, I remember when FSU was recruiting Tony Stewart, and the kid was on campus and they thought they were going to get – this is with them, the kid coming on visits, being on campus, that they thought they were going to get him. And I remember getting a phone call from someone that was close to the kid, and they were like, yeah, he didn't really enjoy his visit. He was kind of by himself. So, and that's with him going on campus, and they read him wrong. So just think how you're doing on a virtual call. Of course, somebody's going to seem, engaged on a virtual call because you have a one-on-one situation, but you really don't get to spend that quality time alone with that individual. And a lot of that is big when they get them on campus. How many times have players stepped on campus and it hasn't been the right fit? You have a kid recruited for a year or two, the coaches realize it's not the right fit, or maybe the player doesn't, but getting them on campus is huge, and they've lost out on that. And like I said, it's been a very difficult process for them because of that. And hopefully they're, on the handful of kids that they did land this year, that they were able to get that enough of evaluation on that these guys can be productive in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And, listen, how, the 2-6 season certainly has had a impact on the commitments or lack thereof, and what they're going to do as far as whether they just sign 15 high school kids and then go after junior college and transfer portal kids for the next 10 spots. But how good could this class have been, or how much better could this class have been if they had the ability to get out and build these relationships and meet these coaches and kids and these parents?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to 4 or 5 kids that they probably could have landed that would have helped them be a 15 or top 20 class, which would have been a good class for this year. You know how it works out. Being able to land an extra 4 or 5 star kids is the difference between where they're at right now and what happened with the whole COVID thing. But I really feel like, they would have had a chance to solidify someone like Brennan Jennings that would have been able to come on campus, even though they're 2-9, they would have been able to explain to him, hey, listen, we're not winning right now, but you're going to be the part of the reason we're going to win. And this is how we're going to utilize you. And this is why you're going to you're going to help us build this. And this is our plan. And that's a big part of the whole evaluation part. A lot of people say, oh, well, they only have 2 wins. Pat, I feel a little different about this situation. I think they should be able to land some kids because there are opportunities. It's still
play early.
It's still Florida State. I got in this argument with one of my friends the other day. Well, why would somebody want to sign with Florida State? It's not like they're, they're not Bethune or FAM, and I'm not trying to knock those schools. They're not some crappy program.
Right. Yes,
they still have, one thing they can say is, hey, all the schools we're going against, who's won a national championship since 2013? Right. They have positive things to sell. And the program is, people talk about the facility. Like, people act like Florida State is Eastern Kentucky,
listen, I've heard the facilities thing, and Florida State's not losing because of facilities.
No.
I know that they won a football operations only building and all of those kinds of things, but Florida State won a lot of football games with Coach Bowden without great facilities compared to some of the other schools. You're never going to, it's a race that you can't win in facilities game at most schools. And listen, so they've got I agree with you. They've got enough of a brand, a reputation, and to get around some of what they may be lacking in the regards to a slide from the second story of a building to the first story of a building for sure. And to back up your point, recruiting is generally a year ahead these days. And you look at their 2022 class, and right now, 24/7 has them ranked as the 15th best 22 class. And to your point, they're still ranked 32nd this year.
Yeah, and you look at it, one thing that Florida State has to sell is playing time. I mean, every kid talks about that. Hey, what are my chances of playing early? They ain't lying at Florida State when they say, hey, listen, you could come in and play right away. Now, the coaches don't want to have to play freshmen, but this is one school that has an opportunity for a lot of kids to look at their depth chart and go, you know what, I'll see the field as a freshman. And I still think there's a lot of positives to sell. I hear all the complaints, but I'm one of those people like, all right, I've heard all of that. I think you're the same way. You get frustrated, but you still got to go out. You still got to recruit. You still have a good product to sell. I don't care. Like records, a lot of kids believe that they're good enough to turn Florida State around, that they're going to be the reason they turn them around. And that's what happened, after Bobby left. Guys like Greg Reed took a chance at Florida State when they weren't on top. A lot of these other kids, James Wilder was one of those guys that he bought in before they started winning again, because they were like, all right, it's a great program. I like the town. I like these coaches. They have a lot to sell. That's a positive. And I think that's what we need to start focusing on, especially not only this year, but moving forward into next year too.
Yeah, and listen, they're 75% of the roster that exists today is redshirt sophomores or below. So it's not like these freshmen are going to have to come in and start competing with a bunch of seniors and juniors. There will be, obviously, a class will move up into the junior class, and so the upperclassmen there'll be more upperclassmen next year. But certainly, you can certainly package that and sell it in a way that makes the kids see opportunity, and I'm sure they're doing that. Obviously, it's hard to play as a true freshman at any position unless you're just an absolute stud or freak or large athlete that's just different. So most of these kids, they would like to come in and redshirt anyway. But let's get into a little bit of the position groups. First of all, everything in college football these days starts around the quarterback. Unfortunately, Florida State lost Luke Altmaier to Ole Miss last week. Ole Miss was winning. Lane Kiffin's got that offense rolling. Matt Corral's having a great sophomore year. Will probably play one more year, and if he has the same kind of year this year, we'll jump to the NFL, I would think. And that gives Luke a chance to play as a redshirt freshman, whereas here he would have come in and had to compete with three other people, all of whom are going to be either redshirt sophomores and Jordan Travis, because they don't lose a year of eligibility. Then you got two more freshmen in Chuba and Tate. So where does Florida State go from here at the quarterback position? Because I think we both agree they probably need to sign one. I think it would be smart to go into the transfer portal myself. There's one name that stands out. I don't know if they have a shot at him or not. Both you and I have heard different things about Mackenzie Milton. But tell me where Florida State goes with a quarterback for this recruiting class.
Yeah, I mean, really the only high school kid they're really looking at right now is the Jake Garcia kid out of California. Miami's been he decommitted from USC. Miami's been on him. I had the chance to watch him at their camp 2 years ago. This is what you want a quarterback to look at like. I mean, if you were going to make a prototype quarterback, I mean, he's got a good arm. He can make all the throws. He's a very talented quarterback. I think he's just as talented or more talented than the guys that Florida State have on their roster. So he'd have an opportunity to start right away. But right now, Miami has the lead mainly because they've been recruiting him longer, and he's been an important part to their recruiting efforts. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, the longer he waits to commit, I think it gives FSU a chance to continue to recruit him. You don't want that commitment to end this week. You want this thing to drag on so they can convince him to go to Florida State. Mackenzie Milton, I think we started talking about this a couple months ago. Like I think I brought it up to you, and I'm like, what did you think? I love the kid. I mean, if he's 100% or 95%, Florida State could win next year with him. And I think the one thing that he brings, and you know how important this is he comes from a winning program. He's going to bring that to that huddle. He's going to bring that to that locker room. He's going to bring we talk about culture. He's been around a winning culture. Everybody talks about culture. He's going to bring that to that team. And even if he doesn't win the job, that means he made somebody else on that roster better. Either Purdy or Tate Rodemaker or Jordan Travis got better because he's going to make them earn that starting job. And that's something I think that's lacked at Florida State the last couple of years is that competition, that guys that James Blackman's basically been given the job the last 3 years by default. And the one thing you've worked at colleges is competition breeds excellence. You want that. And I love Mackenzie. The kid's got that moxie about him. He brings a little of that Johnny Manziel to that locker room, and he's going to make those kids. Florida State has talent on offense. They just need somebody to lead them and direct them, and that's that quarterback position. And he'd be a huge get. And I think it would change the whole momentum of their program. Like they've been sliding. They need that one positive break, and Mackenzie would be it.
Well, yeah, and I agree with everything you've said. I think he's a guy that has the it factor. I think he's a guy that changes your locker room regardless of whether he plays or not. I do see a path that he gets to Florida State, and there's a lot of questions. How healthy is he? How will he hold up once the physicality of football starts? How does he move like he used to? Because obviously buying time in the pocket was a big part of who he was. He's very athletic. So there are a lot of questions. So, he has stated that he wants to extend his playing career beyond college, which means you'd think he needs to go to a place where he can be successful right away and start right away. I've heard everywhere from Alabama to Notre Dame to UCLA to Florida State to Miami to Florida. So there's no telling how this thing is going to play out. But yes, if you're in Alabama and you got that young kid behind Mac Jones, do you bring a Mackenzie Milton into your program? If you're Mackenzie Milton, do you go to a place like Florida State where, quite frankly, they're better on the offensive line and they'll be better again next year, but they have struggled to protect the passer against good pass rush teams like Pitt, who I believe had 8 or 9 sacks against Florida State. Now, Pitt won't be as good every year up front. They've probably got the best defensive line in college football this year. But anyway, so I could see how it could play out. I don't want to get into all the.
Let me jump in real quick. You would know better than I would. All right, how many of those sacks in the Pittsburgh? I mean, I know their D line was good.
Oh yeah.
But how many of those sacks were on the quarterback? Where will Milton throw the ball out of bounds on a play that maybe they take a sack? Will he get the ball to a wide receiver or somebody that he just kicks the ball out to? Is he going to take those options that maybe the quarterbacks this year at FSU didn't take, and maybe instead of 7 sacks, it's 2? Because
now he's a quick decision maker, so I think that would go down regardless. Yeah, I mean, because obviously not every sack is on on the offensive line. Yes, there's sacks that are the running back's fault. There's sacks the receiver's fault because they run the wrong route and he has to hold the ball longer. And obviously there are sacks because the quarterback holds the ball too long. But he is a quick decision maker. Is there anybody else in the portal at quarterback that you've identified as a possible fit for Florida State?
I mean, I think you brought it up at the Jake Bentley kid from Utah ended up in the portal. He's not a great quarterback, but I think he's had over 3,000 yards in a season at South Carolina. I just think they need stability at that position. I don't think they need if they get a game manager or somebody that just could come in and not lose games, who's better than the Hornibrook kid they brought in a couple years ago. If they could get somebody that just has a good enough arm, can stretch the field a little bit, but just it's a one position that you can't be bad at, and they've been really bad at. So I think anything of a positive at that position, bringing somebody in that's experienced, is better than what they've had the last couple of years.
And I agree with you. I like Bentley. We've talked about him. He's a guy that's played football at the highest level, was a starter for 2 years at South Carolina before he got hurt, lost his position, which they probably should wish they had held on to him now because they've gone through a litany of quarterbacks since he left. But he went to Utah, got beat out by a younger guy, a freshman or sophomore. So I think he's a guy that might be a bridge gapper for at least one season. He's a coach's kid, understands football. Again, a great locker room guy. And I think I agree with you. It might be somebody they take a look at. All right, let's turn our focus to what we do know and who we do know. We know that Florida State is going to sign at least 12, or plans to sign at least 12 kids of the 15 committed high school kids and junior college kids on Wednesday or next week. I want to start with the offensive line. They're going to sign 3 tackles, guards, centers. Rod Orr, who we think's a legit player. If he'd signed anywhere, I think both you and I agree that he could have played at the highest. He could have signed with anybody. I think.
I think Rod Orr is the best player in their class. For when you're talking about need, which left tackle, they have a major need there, and just his upside. He's got the greatest upside. He's probably an NFL prospect if he continues to develop. So that's
if he lives up to his potential, if he grows, he's one of those guys that you're not surprised to see. He kind of reminds me of a smaller but taller version of David Sharp that went to Florida from Jacksonville and ended up going to the Raiders. When you saw him, you're like, if this kid does half of what he's able to do, he's a guy that you're going to see playing in NFL.
And ironically, I was watching somebody in the NFL last week. I don't know if he's still in the – I know I saw Sharp starting, so he's and this was a guy that was raw as heck, and everybody was not sure if he could play at Florida, but now he's starting in the NFL. So if he turns out to be David Sharp, that's a lot better than – Abdul Bello and the other guys they've had.
Yeah,
so,
well, I get your point. I get your point.
Hey, we get excited when they get a player that has ability to actually block somebody. I'm not get a hold. That's all I ask, is you're good enough to get a hold on somebody. A holding.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, and to be honest with you, he looks a lot like the offensive lineman Mike signed. These big old tall athletic kids at Memphis. You look at their offensive line, but he's 6'7", 296 from Gaston City, Alabama, and he is a 4-star guy. He will sign early but not enroll till the summer. And a guy that I went back and watched his film today, Fish, that I like him more and more is Kimo McAnally. McAnally from Niceville. And the thing I like about him is he's a lot more athletic than what you think.
Yeah. I'm going to take credit for this one, and I think the Osceola has on offensive lineman. I think we've been ahead of the game this year on every other network, because this was a kid I liked early. I remember, I sent his stuff up to Florida State. I even sent it down. I remember the guy at University of Miami was, he's like, hey, thanks for this. This kid's pretty good. I like him a lot. I think he's got a bit of a mean streak in him.
He does.
You watch his film. Yeah, he gets after it, and he's a big athletic kid. People were worried that was he 250, 260. Now he's almost 300 pounds. Those Samoan kids can put on weight. So, well,
he's got very quick feet. Like you said, he moves very well. He can get out in space, and he doesn't. He can block people out in space. So I think he's better than a 3-star. Of course, I don't pay star rankings are not my deal anyway. But anyway, I really am a fan of Kimo. I think that they've probably I don't know how he was not more highly recruited out of high school. He comes from a great program at Niceville High School, as you well know. They put out players every single year.
They got another kid coming in behind them that they've already offered next year, the Firestone kid. I think that's one area that Florida State's missed the boat in, and I think it should be an area that they should focus heavily in recruiting, is that panhandle. There was a tight end a couple years ago that came out of Navarre that ended up going to Clemson, and the guy beat the heck out of Florida State. I just don't think they should dominate west of Tallahassee, and Pensacola has a lot of players. It's not easy for a lot of schools to get to, so I think they could do well.
And you can lock it down because you're so close.
Yeah, if they could lock it down, I think they could get a lot of NFL-type players out of that area. And this is one of those kids I think in 2 or 3 years could develop into an all-conference, center guard type prospect, and has a chance at potentially playing in the pros in the future. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does when he gets in town. Now, he is not expected to sign on early signing day next week, but he's committed. Then, of course, you go to Bryson Estes, 6'3", 291 from Eagles Landing Christian. He is a 3-star. He will sign next week and is planning on early enrolling. Again, another solid prospect. Doesn't wow you with his numbers, but again, a kid that's probably a little bit more athletic than what you think, but certainly a guy that I think is a guard center in college. What are your thoughts on Bryson?
I mean, we talked about this with Coach Silva, on podcasts and stuff, is that these are the guys that Florida State used to recruit and do very well with. Not every guy has to be a high 4 or 5-star on the O-line. It's a one area I think we could throw stars out, because I just think that the guys rating them really don't know. If the guy's not developed right now, that's how they evaluate a kid on the O-line. And I think that's the biggest mistake you can make, is because O-line really are projections. They're 2-3 years down the road. And this is one of those guys. You turn on his film, his technique's very good. He comes from a good program. He's very well coached. I think he's a guy that could come in and be a 2-3 year starter at center. And that's another position. Maurice Smith's done a very good job, but FSU has not had good center play since Cam Irving was there. And I think this is a guy that they wouldn't have taken in the past. And this is where they've made that mistake, is these are the guys that in 2 to 3, you don't hear about them for 2 years in the program, and then all of a sudden they're starting and they end up all conference ACC type players.
Yeah, and of course, that gives FSU 3 committed offensive linemen with 10 scholarships to give if you can sign 25 initials, because they're at 15. What do you see Florida State doing from an offensive line standpoint? Are they going to hold at 3, go into the transfer portal or JUCO portal, or JUCO route? How many more do you think they sign before February, the first Wednesday in February?
I think they're going to take. You know how I feel. I think they got to take at least 4 or 5 on the O-line. There's a kid out of Trinity Christian that I like a lot. They're looking at right now. I think his name's Austin. I can't think his name.
I know the kid you're talking about, but I don't have his name on top of my list either. I really like the kid. I think one more high school kid, and then you bring in 2 JUCO like transfer kids, so you bring in 6 total. Okay.
I'm of the belief you keep bringing these guys in until you find the guys to get it done, because it's a numbers game. You're not gonna find 3 and go 3 for 3. I think you got to bring in 5 a class. Yeah, you got to bring in 5 a class, 2 start. One becomes maybe one becomes a quality backup starter. The other guy becomes a depth guy, and you'll probably miss on at least one. You've looked. They've signed 7 kids in a class in the last 6 or 7 years in one class, and I think none of them, or maybe 6 of the 7, are no longer there. So there's a lot of misses on the offensive line, and that's why I believe it's a numbers game. You got to continue to bring in 4 to 5 a year, and you'll eventually get it right.
Yeah, and of course we move on to tight end, and they've got 2 committed tight ends, both expected to sign next week. Jackson West, 6'4", 231 from Huntsville, Alabama. He's a 3-star kid. He will be an early enrollee. And then you've got Kobe Gross, who is a little bit of an unknown, has not a lot of film on him, was out as a Western guy, California guy, was last at Diablo Valley College, 6'3", 235, a 3-star. Again, a guy that is kind of a little bit of an unknown. Don't know much about him, not much tape. He's a big kid. And then, of course, to me, the third tight end is now you get Jordan Wilson, the UCLA transfer back from injury, a guy that came to finish his grad year here at Florida State, and obviously now has another year because of COVID to come back, and that was the plan. So you really get 3 tight ends coming back. So tell me a little bit about Jackson West and Kobe Gross. What do you think about those kids?
Jackson West may be the most underrated player in their class as far as you turn on his film, and that's what a tight end should look like. I actually wasn't sure what to think about him when I first heard that he was committed, because he wasn't a highly rated kid. But one thing Norvell has proven is to be able to find tight ends. I went back and watched their Memphis film, and the one thing is, a big part of his offense is that tight end position. And that's been a weakness this year. Whether they run power run plays, their tight ends are very involved in their offense. And without him having the pieces there, his offense is going to be limited. And until he gets that position settled in, I don't think their offense is going to be to their optimum. So
I agree. He hasn't had the tight end to run the power run game, lead with tight ends. I mean, Cameron McDonald to get bigger and better. Wyatt's a quarterback, obviously. Then you had 2 true freshmen, walk-on and a scholarship kid that didn't play. So, yeah, I agree with you. That their offense could look a lot different with a tight end that could lead plays in the run game.
Yeah. Now, one kid I've sent, I resent their stuff back up to this year. This week that I think they should get on is Weston Wolf. He's a tight end out of Venice High School. He's committed to Maryland right now. I think he's an ideal fit for what Norvell wants. Now, it becomes a numbers thing. They may, like you said, the kid from UCLA is coming back. They may not think they need another tight end, but he's a guy that I would circle back on and take a real good hard look at, because I feel he's a perfect fit for Norvell's offense.
Yeah, that'll give you 6 scholarship tight ends, and you've almost feel like you got a scholarship Preston Daniel, to be honest with you. He's played more than Carter Boatwright.
Right.
And so, right now they'd have 7 on the roster next year that will either be scholarship or have played this past season. So it gets a lot deeper, a lot quicker there. And listen, I've seen Kobe Gross's tape. I think he's he looks bigger than he's listed as 6'3", 235. Either he's not 6'3" or he's bigger than 235 because he looks more 250 to 260-ish based on that tape from junior college. Is there any chance that you think Kobe, now I know they're bringing him as a blocker, is there any chance that he could work his way to the offensive line at some point?
I think there's a very good shot at him being an offensive lineman, especially with him. I think he redshirted 1 year at JUCO and he's a 4 for 3. So he's a guy that basically at Florida State, they could sit for a year, maybe get him big enough up to 285, 290 and let him play center. You have an athletic center there that gives you another option there. I think his film's so limited, you really don't know what you have until he's on campus, And then, like you said, are his measurables accurate? I mean, who the heck's measured this kid? They haven't had junior college football this year. I don't even know if this kid's has he even been on his college campus, or is he in Tallahassee? Where's he at?
My understanding he's living down in the Tampa area, and he has been up here. At least if you follow him on Twitter, which I do, he said he's been coming to Tallahassee.
Well, it's going to be interesting that, once they weigh him in, if he weighs in, if he comes in and he's 265, 270, I think you redshirt him this year and put some weight on him and play him at center.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that where he eventually works his way down the line. I'm with you there. All right, let's go to the rest of the skill positions. No running backs so far with this class, and one wide receiver, Joshua Burrell, 6'2", 212 from Blythewood High School in South Carolina, 3-star, a guy that will sign next week and enroll in January. I like this tape, big, strong receiver, 6'2", 212, strong hands, does a great job, his hands are friendly to the football. What are your thoughts on Josh?
He's kind of similar to the guy that's recruiting him. He's kind of a Ron Dugan's type. He's a bigger, more physical receiver. He's not going to stretch the field type for you, but he could give you that ability to throw some fade routes in the end zone, and he'll be effective on third down. I think he's going to be a good possession receiver. He runs pretty good routes. Like I said, he's not going to stretch the field. He's not going to get you that 70 or 80 yard play, but he could give you 8 catches for 80 or 90, 100 yards in a game. So I think he could give you some consistency at that position. They just that's one position that with the talent they have on their roster, it's going to be interesting to see what happens the next couple of years, because they have players there. They need to step up.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you think they'll at wide receiver, you think there'll be any portal guys or junior college guys?
I do think Destin Hill or whatever he changed his name to. These kids.
I know the kid you're talking, Louisiana kid.
I think he's in their class, and I think he's their best receiver prospect they'll have signed in the last probably 10 years since Rashad Green. But the third receiver is going to definitely be a grad transfer. I definitely think they want to bring an older kid in.
So you think Destin Payzon's signing in February?
I think he's signing with Florida State, yes.
Okay. All right, well, let's slide over to the defensive side of the ball. They've got 9 guys committed, 7 of which are expected to sign next week. But let's start with just because of the last 2 commitments, and I don't think he's an outside linebacker. That's how he's listed by recruiting services. But Patrick Payton from Miami Northwestern, 6'5", 205, 4-star recruit. Watched his film again this morning. I've got some questions about his size. How much weight can he actually carry? You can't see him in person, so you really don't get a true feeling for what the width of his shoulders are and how much more weight he could carry. But give us your initial thoughts on Patrick Payton and where you see him in college.
Yeah, I saw him last year against Columbus, and Columbus is a good football program. They won a state championship. He had 5 sacks in the game. So the one thing Florida State lacks, they have 10 sacks this year, is they need a pass rusher, and this is a big boost to that. Patrick can get after the quarterback. Now, where you line him up, that's what those guys get paid a lot of money for. Is he going to put on the weight and be like a Brian Burns and be a 235, 240-pound DN? He'll be undersized, but he's fast enough off the edge to not get blocked so easily, or do you play him as an outside linebacker, stand-up guy? The craziest thing is I think linebacker has become one of the hardest positions to evaluate now, Pat, mainly because these guys don't play traditional linebackers.
Well, yeah, you're playing out in space a hell of a lot more than you were. Yeah.
Yeah, you either see them on the edge or they're playing in the slot. You just don't see. So he's gonna have to learn how to play the position in college, but his speed and his athleticism is something that they lack. And it's going to be refreshing to see a guy that could get after the quarterback for them. So I think they have a guy that can, he could play maybe a little early on as a specialty type player, bring him in on a pass, a third and 20 and let him just go rush the passer. But he definitely is going to need some time to develop at Florida State. He is a thin kid, but he has the body to put on weight.
That was my only question on him. Listen, he looks like he's got a high motor. He pursues the ball well. He looks like he plays within the scheme of the defense. Yeah. He uses great eye discipline and reading the read zone and before he commits inside or going after the quarterback. So was impressed with that. But most of what I saw, now he was lined up at defensive end, and so that's kind of where I'm going with that. Then, hey, a guy that I really like, I watched Shaheem Brown. 6'1", 185, committed last week from Lake City, Florida, Columbia High School, coached by former Seminole Brian Allen. He's a 3-star guy, and I'm going to tell you what, the one thing you know about Brian's kid is kids that they are tough. You're going to get a tough kid coming out of Lake City, but really a phenomenal athlete, in my opinion. Plays receiver, plays a little bit of DB, kind of looks like Lake City's version of Hamza. He's their human eraser. He takes out the trash for them, but really runs well, aggressive. Again, a kid that listed at 6'1", 185, got him listed at an outside linebacker. I'm not sure he's not a safety. What are your thoughts on Shaheem?
Yeah, I mean, these are the type of guys that Jim Leavitt took when he was at USF and looked really good as a coach because he took them. Shaheem's
like a Louis Gachette.
Yeah, he comes from a program. What I like, and the one thing is when you're recruiting, especially whether guys are corners and they could play safeties or safeties that could play corner, the old Jimmy Johnson mentality is versatility. And this kid's he's very versatile. You're not going to get, I get nervous when you recruit a safety and that's all he could play. And then if he doesn't pan out, what do you do with him? Shaheem's one of those guys that maybe he doesn't have a position now, but he does so many things really well that you'll be able to find something for him to do. He's going to make my guess is he'll make an impact probably right away on special teams next year. He'll improve that position. I think linebacker has been kind of a weakness for Florida State, even though they got a lot better this year. They can only improve that position on their team, and I think he and adding him and Patrick Payton helped that position a lot.
Yeah, and he's a long 6'1". Again, same question. You don't question his ability. You question where his size will allow him to go in college. But 6'1", 185, plays receiver, does some kick returning. But listen, I was about as fired up about Shaheem as I was Patrick, to be quite honest with you, as I sat down and watched their tape. Then, of course, the guy that fits the linebacker mold, body type-wise, is Jordan Eubanks from Guyton High School in Denton, Texas, a 3-star, 6'2", 200. It's been a while since I've taken a look at Josh. I remember thinking he was a solid prospect. What are your thoughts on Eubanks?
Yeah, I think Jordan's one of those guys that is a developmental guy. He does has the measurables, but I think turning on his film, I still think there's a lot he can learn on a football field. And I think he's one of those guys you want to redshirt, let him learn the college game. It's going to be a big step up for him. I mean, I definitely think I don't want to knock the kid because I've never seen him live. And that's one thing I put a lot of premium on. When you're evaluating kids. I mean, highlight films are great, but there's only so much you can see. So he's a guy that you got to wait and see how he develops once he gets on campus.
Yep. All right, let's move up front. It was supposed to be a position of strength for Florida State this year on its current football team. It was not. And obviously you've gotten Corey Durden, who is opted out, will not be back. It does not look like. Jamarcus Chapman had done the same thing. Dennis Briggs opted out, then came back. And so you're losing some guys, and you may lose more after the season's over. Who knows? But let's talk a little bit about the three guys they're planning on signing. Two guys are planning on signing early. Byron Turner, a 6'3", 237, three-star defensive end from New Orleans St. Augustine High School. Looked like a very solid kid, good size, I think about 6'3.5". Looks like he can put on some weight, could play defensive end or eventually end up inside. What are your thoughts on Byron?
Yeah, I think Byron Turner, I'm going to put Byron Turner and Joshua Farmer kind of in the same boat. I think they're similar players when you turn on the film. They're basically built the same way. Yep. Either or, one or both could end up moving inside. I'd have to, once again, these are guys you want to see how they are in their lower body. Do they have big hips, big backside, big legs? Can they put on the weight? Watching them on film, I think both of them are versatile, that they could play inside or out. They could be, if you go to a three-man front, they could probably play outside. If you play a four-man front, slide them inside and give you a pass rush. They're both guys that have ability. They're not super fast twitch guys, but they do get to the quarterback. They are productive. When you turn on the film, they make plays behind the line of scrimmage. That's the main thing, is guys that can, shoot the gaps and be able to, put the defense in plus situations. There haven't been a lot of second and third and longs, and that's one thing that these guys are able to do, at least on the high school film, and hopefully they can continue to bring that to Florida State when they get to that next level.
Yeah, and Farmer's already 6'3", 250. He plays for Corey Fuller at Gadsden County High School, a former Seminole. I know Corey runs a tough practice, so the kid's tough. He has gotten bigger and bigger every single year, so he's a guy that I could definitely see squeezing down to one of the two interior positions if he continues that. And he's a guy that's going to enroll early and go through hopefully spring next year. But a guy that you have to listen. He has stayed committed to Florida State through two tough seasons. So you got one of the things you got to like about Joshua is that he wants to be a Seminole. So I can't wait to see what he does when he gets here. Of course, a local kid, and then of course the third defensive tackle prospect, Chambray Jackson, a 4-star recruit from Orlando Boone, is not expected to sign early. He's a little bit shorter guy, 6'2", 230, but. The guy looks like he could put on some weight, an explosive guy. And sometimes, some of the best pass rushers in the NFL, like going back to Dwight Freeney and Elmas Dumerville, they're not 6'4" guys, they're 6'2" guys.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing what he really measures in at. I've been around this kid. He just seems a lot bigger than what he's listed at. I want to see what he's listed at once he steps on at Florida State, because my guess he's closer to 250 than he is 230. I would agree. I don't think and he's a big body kid. He's thick, big bone. Like he's a kid that is going to be a carry. He could be a 265-pound DN. I don't think weight's going to be a problem putting on him, just from body type and length and what he is. But I'm interested. I mean, Chambray is one of the best players in their class, and he's a guy that committed when they weren't playing so well. So he didn't look at it like, all right, I'm going to commit when they're at the top. This kid pulled the trigger when they were on a losing streak. So that shows to me that kid doesn't care what they did on the field this year. He feels he's good enough to help them improve. And that you talk about the buy-in, he's buying into whatever Florida State's selling right now. So.
Yep. All right. So you got 3 defensive front guys committed. We think there's going to be a scholarship still go to a quarterback, maybe 2 wide receivers, maybe 2 more offensive linemen. So it gives you 5 more to play with on the defensive side of the ball. How many go to the defensive front, in your opinion, through February or through the transfer portal?
I think if they could they're on a kid, Tawan Malone, who's out of New Jersey, Bergen Catholic.
Good program.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is, and I'm not going to count I'm going to call him the old man now, the grizzly man. I'm not going to count Odell out. Like, when you count this guy out, he seems to always pull one of these kids on signing day. Whether it's, I remember all the way back to Clifton Dixon. Clifton Dixon put the FSU hat on when he was supposed to go to Miami. And you look at, when he wasn't, they said, oh, he's lost a step. He pulled in Eddie Goldman. He lost a step. He he finds a way he's kind of like a sniper. He sits in those woods and he bags a big game. And I'm not going to doubt him. The Malone kid's down really to two schools that are heavily as FSU and Mississippi. And people are going to go, how is a kid from from New Jersey looking at Mississippi? Oh, they must be doing something wrong. Chris Partridge is on their staff. He used to coach in New Jersey. He was on Jim Harbaugh's class. He's the guy that signed Rashawn Gary. So that's why they're in it for him, and they have a legitimate shot. Supposedly the kid wants to play baseball. I got to see that. He's a huge kid. So, maybe Mike Martin Jr. can help out the team a little bit, but he's one that they'll hold a scholarship out because he's such a big-time player. Maybe there's some guys in the JUCO ranks or grad transfers that I think they're looking at a grad transfer or JUCO kid from Kansas. We did a story on him just a couple weeks ago, but I definitely think there's very few guys left on the board. There's a George Wilson kid from Virginia, but I think he may have just pulled the trigger for someone else. But there's one or two guys on the defensive line they'll hold out spots for, but most of those spots are going to probably go to grad transfers.
Yeah, and I agree. Now, one I think another spot they've got to go through the grad transfer portal or JUCO. I think they got to get a middle linebacker. I'm not sure they've identified their middle linebacker of the future yet. Stephen Dix has obviously still got a ways to go, and he'll continue to get better. There's no doubt he's only a true freshman. But what are your thoughts on do they add an additional middle linebacker, which I think they have to?
Yeah, I definitely think, like I said, talking to the guys that I know, the one thing that was stressed to me is they're going to go heavily in the grad transfer. Yeah. I think you're looking at somewhere between 5 is the floor and anywhere from 10 to 12. I think that minimum 5, 10 to 12. And I just think that's what they're going to do. They want to bring in some older guys that are part of some winning programs and change. It's nice to have young players, but you sat there and you said, 75% of the rosters, freshmen and sophomores. You're not going to win a lot of ball games next year if your roster's almost all freshmen and sophomores. I don't care how good of a coaching staff you are. You want some older guys on the team. So
yeah, and listen, I hope that they'll get to a point where the main, the vast majority of recruits are coming from the high school pipelines, but obviously the transfer portal and what's probably going to turn into that penalty-free transfer year is going to change a lot of things this year for sure. Let me ask you one more question.
One quick thing. Manny Diaz is going to probably get an extension this year because of the transfer portal, so it can work.
Yeah, it can work. He certainly has proved. He has certainly proved that. Let me ask you this. I'll wait till I'll circle back to this when we get done with the DBs. All right, so they've got 3 DBs committed. Hunter Washington from Katy, Texas, a 4-star guy. He's early signee. Marion Cooper from Lehigh Acres, another 4-star guy, 6'1", 170, who's not expected to sign next week. And then Kevin Knowles, who's from down in your neck of the woods, 5'10", 168, a 3-star from Hollywood, MacArthur. He will be an early enrollee. Give me your thought. I'll start with the guys down near you. Let's start with Kevin Knowles. What are your thoughts on Kevin?
All right, Kevin, I wasn't sure about him last year, but I thought he was kind of a reach early, but, I spoke to their head coach like 2 weeks ago. His name is Kevin Burnett. Kevin played at Tennessee under Fulmer, played for the Dolphins. He told me this kid's going to play on Sundays. And I don't feel like he was blowing smoke up my butt. He's not one of these coaches that overrates kids. He just said the kid's a dog. Like, he gets after it. He's one of the best players on the team. He's a leader on the team. And I was taken back because I liked his film his junior year. I wasn't sure if he was a Florida State take. I thought he was maybe more of a power, maybe a group of 5, lower end power 5 type kid. But from talking to him, he feels like the kid is going to be a guy that can contribute right away and will play on Sundays. And I think that's a good thing. If he's out to be, does that. And the one thing is, these kids down here do play against elite kids week in and week out, and that means a lot to the adjustment period. I mean, you look at Jarvis Brownlee. He was a kid I liked a lot. He was a late take. He's one of their best DBs, and that's why you try and find these type of kids down here.
What about Cooper from Lehigh Acres?
Yeah, I've liked Cooper all along. He's another guy. I think he's been one of their top players. I think it's important that they keep him committed. You'd like to see him signed early, because I definitely think if this kid waits to the second signing period, he's talked about taking visits. You want to shut that thing down. Like, you really don't want to have to re-recruit these kids for another month.
No.
Amarian's been committed to him for a very long time. Do you get a little? I get a little queasy that the Quayshawn Fuller kid's brother was I don't know if he was pushed out or this or that. It seems like the kids at that school have soured a little bit from Florida State. So hopefully they can hold on to him, because once again, I think he's one of their top prospects in their class. He gives you a corner with size, length. He can run. You could play him at boundary corner. You could play him. You could move him into the slot and play him over the slot, or maybe even play him over. He could play all over. He's versatile enough to play multiple positions on the back end. And these type of guys, Cooper's one of the best players to come out of that area in the last few years, and I think he's an important recruit right now for them.
Yeah, and let's go to our last DB, which is Hunter Washington. He's been committed since this summer. A good-looking prospect, 5'11", 178 from Katy High School in Katy, Texas. Yeah,
I've only done an evaluation like you, basically on a highlight film. Once again, he's listed at 5'11", 175 pounds. I think he's more of a safety than a corner. That's just my opinion. Because most of the plays you watch, you don't see him turn his back a lot. A lot of the plays are in front of him.
Yeah.
You want to see how he could turn. The one thing that does concern me, I always look at for corners, is ability to transition from back to front or front to back, and it needs to be a natural thing. A lot of times when he's playing off coverage on the film, he doesn't react quickly. So I'm wondering how good his hips are and that thing. So that's why I kind of project him more maybe as a corner, safety than a corner. Yeah. It'll be interesting once he steps on campus what he becomes. He's a good football player, but there's a few things that you want to see technique wise. I think he needs to improve on some things. But they're so good at DB right now that they have a lot of talent on the roster that guys like this will have time to develop some of those skills.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've gone through the class, so that right now, if they hold on to everybody, that gives them 12 new signees next week, with 3 more to go in February and 10 more scholarships to give. Now, one of the unintended consequences of COVID is no one lost a year of eligibility. So Florida State's got 5 seniors right now that are planning to start the game against Duke. In particular, 3 stand out to me because Hamza has accepted the invitation to the Senior Bowl. So you got to think that he is gone and will not be back next year. Then on the defense, you got 3 guys, Janarius Robinson, Joshua Kando, and Emmett Rice. And J-Rob has come on of late. Rice has consistently gotten better throughout the year as he's gotten more used to this defense. And they were teammates that were praising J-Rob today at Mike Norvell's press conference. What are your thoughts on any of those 3 guys coming back next year?
You've turned on and watched the games. Emmett Rice may be one of the most improved players on the team.
Yeah, I agree.
He was not good last year, and He struggled early on. And if you had asked me after 3 or 4 games, you kind of are like, all right, let's push this kid out and see what. But he's the one player that's flashed the last few weeks and gotten a lot better. So you'd like to have him back for one more year. He was a developmental kid coming out of Norland, and this is what you wait for, is where that light finally comes on. It seems like the lights finally switched on inside his head, and he's starting to get it. So Emmett's definitely one you'd like to bring back anytime you could bring. I think Kando and Robinson have been. I think people have been too hard on them. I think they're both very talented. They just have. I don't know if it's been unlucky. I mean, Kando's had these freak injuries. He's had moments where he's flashed. Janarius is an incredible athlete. He was very raw coming out of high school. I had him as a top 10 player rated in the state because of his potential. If they could come back, you're taking them back. I mean, like I said, those are two of the prettiest looking kids you'll ever see as far as, what you want a defensive end. Maybe just one more year, then coming back and being under the same coach and having some stability and having, healthy years. Those two guys have NFL potential. Now, I know people laugh at that, but they do. They're both big. They're everything you want in a defensive end. If you're going to build defensive ends, that's what you want them to look like. 6'4", 6'5". I mean, Janarius is 6'5". He's long. He's athletic. And I just think they've been hurt because of the whole situation the last couple of years. And they're both great kids. Everybody wants to throw all these kids out. They're not all bad kids. I think everybody goes, let's just flip the roster. We'll bring in. You don't want to bring in 85 new guys next year. You're not going to win. So if you can bring these two guys back, one, they give you stability at that position. Two, they bring you two guys that have played a lot of football, a lot of snaps, and they're only going to get better being in the system one more year.
Well, and I've talked to at least two defensive line coaches in college football on a regular basis, all who are familiar with Florida State, and both of them tell me, "Boy, I wish I could coach those two kids. I wish somebody give me a chance to screw them up." So, but anyway, they really impressed with Janarius Robinson and Kado, and I do want to commend these four particular kids. A lot of the story, and even five with Bavion Johnson on offense. As you look at the two deep for this week, there's only 5 seniors on the two deep, and Bavion, Janarius Robinson, Joshua Kando, Emmett Rice, and Hamza Nasruddin. All right, as you well know, football's a grind in the season. All right. And it's particularly a grind when you're losing and you're going to practice every day and you're tired and you're sore and you're frustrated. I think it says a lot more about Mike Norvell and his staff that these 5 guys have persevered and chose to fight than the defections and the opt-outs do from some of your other guys. And I think the story may be that these 5 guys stayed, and it tells you a little bit about them personally, individually, but also about what they think about Mike Norvell. Because, listen, going to Hamza. Hamza had everything to lose by coming back and playing this season and even continuing to play now that he's proven himself into the NFL, that he's healthy by playing the NC State game. Just talk about those 5 guys and what that means to the buy-in factor, the perception of that's been taking place because the other kids have left.
Pat, I'm going to give everybody a free pass this year. And people are going to say, I know the impact it's had on my life this season. Right. I mean, I'm worn out. Like I've never been through, I deal with a lot of high school kids. I do a lot of filming. I've had to, just the scheduling change. Every week I have to call up every coach I know and say, are you guys playing this? And they're like, yes. And that's Monday. On Thursday, they're like, hey, we're not playing this week. And every week is something new. And it's just been such a grind that I give any kid credit that stuck it out. I know fans are like, that kid quit on the team. Like, I don't know if I wouldn't have quit on this year. It's been such an odd and crazy year and so unpredictable. I'm not going to blame these kids and be mad at them if they decide. I think it's great that they've stuck it out, Bavion and these guys, because they've had every reason to quit. The team,
the season could seems to go on forever. It's going to go on 2 weeks past what it was normally supposed to, and that's if they don't get a bowl game, if there's even any bowls played. But so I don't think people realize the grind that a college football season is on kids mentally, physically, emotionally, and for these 5 seniors to continue to go through it. You got to give them a tip of the cap, a high five, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I have a high school coach that's playing his first game today. I mean, his first game, they may play one game. And I mean, it's not like they got any college prospects, you know? I mean, the guy told me 2 weeks ago, he goes, Fish, I don't even have a trainer. So it's like, you can bitch and complain all you want, but what these guys have gone through, they'll never go through again. And thank God, you know, it's like, I wanted to quit on the season 3 weeks ago. I opted out, but it kept pulling. It's like the mob. It kept pulling me back in. It kept pulling me back in. So
football has that way about it. There's no doubt.
I mean, look, me and you scrapped a little bit this year. What does that say?
I was so frustrated with the opt-outs and.
Hey, listen, man.
The season would never end.
That's the one thing that separates guys, you know, from the other side. You know what? We can get a little scrap and we'll go have a beer this weekend. All right?
Oh, yeah. Listen, if you're not having a good debate with somebody about football, you're doing something wrong. That's for sure. And nobody's ever 100% right. So you keep on throwing darts like that. You're going to be right.
Trust me. Nobody reminds me about my hits, but man, I still hear about Vince Williams. You know, I missed on Vince. I still got to hear about it.
Well, it's funny that you say this. I picked up Twitter this morning and was scrolling through, and somebody that I follow who has a definitive opinion on Florida State stuff had put something out there, and I remembered when he had tweeted out in preseason that James Blackman was fixed after watching one highlight, and I was like, all right, well, this is bad. But anyway, hey, Fish, I know you got a lot to do. I know you got a game to go to. We spent about an hour going over this class. Certainly appreciate all your insight. And of course,
it's great. We got to get back on signing day and do more of these, man. I enjoyed it. I thought this was a good one. I thought we clicked today, man. It would seem like we were on.
We had it going. It was our day. There's no doubt about that. But listen, we'll follow up with you next week and come back in and see what's changed. There could be an addition or subtraction from the class by then, as you well know.
We got our fingers crossed. Come on, Mike Norvell. You can pull it.
Right.
Hey, Bobby was always a great closer, man. So that's
Hey, how weird will this be that it's going to happen in the middle of a game week?
Oh, just crazy. It's like I said, it's a crazy year. Crazy year.
Because usually if you're on a staff, you're sitting in a staff room drinking coffee and eating bagels, waiting on these facts to come through. These guys are now going to be sitting in a staff room game planning for Wake Forest at the same time, still anticipating these names that come through. So it's going to be interesting. Listen, having been on the inside of that building, a building during signing period, it will definitely be a different day to have signing day and still being in the middle of your work week for a football game.
So you're saying Mike Norvell won't be on ESPN on the War Room? Like they're going to show him?
I'm sure they're going to try to bring some attention to it somehow. Yeah. They're not going to do that, especially with some of these guys they've got committed. They're going to put some fanfare out there for sure. But it won't be totally 100% focused on recruiting. That's for sure. They may turn that over to our buddies over in the recruiting office and, hey, bring us the facts when it's in. We'll be in the staff room working. But anyway, hey,
well, that's great, man. I'm out, man, but I appreciate everything. All right.
All right, man. We'll catch up next week.
Talk to you later.
All right. And we appreciate all our Osceola subscribers and podcast listeners checking us out. And we will be back next week on Seminole Sidelines. Thank you for joining.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. And right now, enter the code FSU20 and get 20% off your annual subscription. That's FSU20.